Hey everyone, in this video I am beginning my coverage on Kurt Busiek's Astro City. For those of you unfamiliar with this book, it is a very critically acclaimed comic that it has been publishing since 1995. So far it's been collected in over 17 trade paperback volumes, and every so often new ones still do come out. This series has won multiple Harvey and Eisner Awards as well. Now, I just started reading this series for the first time recently, and it is honestly amazing, so I'm really stoked to go through it with you all. Now, I've covered a few of other Kurt Busiek's books here on my channel. I've covered his Conan the Barbarian run, which is amazing. You've got to check out my videos on that. I've also covered his Marvels book here on my channel, and that's a mini-series at Marvel where he told the history of the Marvel Universe, but from the perspective of a normal civilian, which was an intriguing way to tell the story. And Astro City is also very unique, very similar in vibe to Marvel's. In Astro City, we are going to learn about this superhero universe that Kurt Busiek created. And in many ways, it's very similar to the DC and Marvel universe. A lot of the characters are kind of analogs to characters in DC and Marvel. And even though they're different, they still in many ways feel familiar to us, which is very nice. Also, a lot of the stories in Astro City are told from the perspective of civilians, which is very interesting. Another thing is that there's no real main character in this book. The main character is just the world itself and everybody that occupies this world. And every issue is usually a self-contained story, just a little vignette on some storyline in this world. So I think it is a really cool storytelling device explored throughout this book. Now, just to give you a taste on some of the storylines we're going to have in this first volume here. The first issue, we are going to learn what is a typical day in the life of Superman. The Superman is different in this book, but basically that's what it is answering. The second issue shows us the perspective of a journalist in this crazy superhero world. Issue 3, we are following a low-level criminal that just so happened to discover Batman's identity. It's not Batman, but it's a character like Batman. So he discovers Batman's identity. How is he going to sell that information now? Issue 4, we are learning about this district called Shadow Hill, where all the civilians do various rituals to fend off the occult. And even though it's kind of weird and superstitious, it's familiar and comforting to them. And in issue 5, we're following a character that perhaps wants to plot an alien invasion of Earth. In issue 6, the Superman hero of this world is going on a date with the Wonder Woman character of this world. So anyway, lots of interesting tales that are going to be explored throughout this series. Let's dive into it now. The first volume of Astro City. Astro City Volume 1, Life in the Big City. Written by Kurt Busiek, art by Brent Anderson. Covers by Alex Ross. Astro City, Issue 1, In Dreams. When the book opens up, we are introduced to a superhero named the Samaritan, aka Asa Martin. The Samaritan is basically the Superman of this world. And this issue will answer the question, what is an average day of life like for a Superman-type figure? So the Samaritan, he is dreaming, and in his dreams, he flies. But, unfortunately, his alarm goes off, and it's time to wake up. It's time to go to work. He puts on his Samaritan outfit, and he flies to the Philippines to stop a tidal wave from hitting. He uses his powers to disperse the wave, cracking energy against it, and causing it to disperse. Then afterwards, there's the shock damage to deal with and venting the volcano that caused the wave. And then when flying back home, there were pyramid assassins in Turkey and a nasty chrono rift in Stuttgart. But eventually, the Samaritan made it into his office with moments to spare. Now the Samaritan is in his civilian Asa Martin form. He greets his coworkers and he prepares for his day as a journalist for a magazine called The Current. Asa Martin dips into his office and he begins his work. Most of his work he can rip through really quickly. One of his tasks today is to fact-check a story on the first family, The first family are the Fantastic Four kind of heroes of this world. We'll learn more about them later. The Samaritan, he uses an advanced computer called an exiometer to assist him with his tasks. The exiometer will help him do his civilian job, phone calls, reference sites, report generation, but it will also monitor over 75 news sources, radio, TV, newswires, and rank crises by urgency, which will help him know what superhero tasks he should also do. So while he's in his office and his coworkers think he's actually working, he flies out the window and does more superhero stuff. He deals with a runaway bus in Midtown. Then an attack on the Denver City Hall by Dr. Saturday. Then a near disaster at FBU's biolabs. Then he flies back to work, shuffles some papers around, adds a few handwritten notes to the reports, and generally makes it look like his office has actually been used this morning. And now it's lunchtime. The Samaritan's coworkers ask if he wants to join them for lunch, but he says he can't, he has an appointment. The Samaritan then flies over to the Honor Guard headquarters, which are like the Justice League of this world. There, he has a team meeting with the other members of the Honor Guard. The other members of this group are MPH, Black Rapier, Cleopatra, Quarrel, Enforcer, and Beauty. Quarrel jokes the Samaritan, "Cutting it a bit fine, eh, Big Red? We were getting ready to start without ya." Well, they have their team meeting, they compare notes, who's in jail, who's at large, who's disappeared completely. Cleopatra reports some gnomes massing in the mountains. Black Rapier thinks the deacon's up to something. Samaritan, he talks about Pyramid and Dr. Saturday. Suddenly, they are alerted that the Menagerie gang was robbing a bank, so they all traveled over there to stop it together. It was almost embarrassing how outmatched the bad guys were. The Samaritan then flies back to his office day job. There, his boss is knocking on his office door saying, "Hey, Samaritan, you'd better be in there. Lunch hour ended 10 minutes ago." The Samaritan opens the door and gives his piece on the first family. He is then assigned a new task to write a story about the 25 most beautiful women in Astro City. As the Samaritan works on this story, he begins to be a little saddened by it. All these beautiful women in his city, women that he could date, but yet he would never have the time. He's given up so much for this double life, and he never has time for himself, for a personal life, to find a romantic partner. As the Samaritan is lost in this thought, it is almost a relief when the alert signal goes off. He programs the exiometer for the afternoon's task, and then he leaves it to them. The afternoon goes by. A jailbreak on Bero Island, helping a maritime museum raise the sea blaze that was sunk in 1665, saving a cat from a tree. As he saved the cat, he slowed down for a few seconds to let the little girl see him clearly and reassure her that it's all right. And that almost cost a man in Boston his life. But the Samaritan saved that guy too. He makes a note to himself to try to not waste time like that in the future. He then holds a building together while people evacuate it. The Samaritan thinks to himself, "I can't save everybody. People die even while I'm saving lives here, but I can still do what I can. Can't I?" It turns out that the building that was bombed that he was holding up to get evacuated was only bombed to draw the police attention away while the mayor was being kidnapped. So once evacuations were complete, Samaritan brought in the kidnappers and then headed back to his day job for a late wrap-up, and then back as Samaritan to appear at the Firefighters Association dinner where they were going to give him an award. Samaritan, in the beginning, simply tried to ignore these kind of events, but it offended people. When he didn't show up to get his award, it was like he was saying he was too good for them. So he shows up to all these places to get these awards, and he smiles and he eats the chicken dinner that they give him. And in the course of the dinner, he'll excuse himself once or twice to deal with the crisis somewhere else in the world. After the dinner, he shakes the host's hands and he autographs helmets at the Firefighters Association, and he reiterates that it is they that are the true heroes. After the dinner, he disappears in the nearby alleyway, and he lets his mind go blank from the day's tension, and he reaches the state of calm necessary for the shift, and he takes a step sideways into his closet kind of dimension, and there he places the award that the Firefighters Association gave him, along with all the other many awards he has gotten over the years. Samaritan was ready for some peace and quiet, but no, he then gets attacked by an enemy known as the Living Nightmare. The Living Nightmare rams through Samaritan's Empyrean web like there was nothing there. The Living Nightmare was created years ago by a psychologist who tried to eliminate fear. Instead, all he did was externalize it, creating a violent, destructive creature that lashes out at anything that threatens it. The Living Nightmare often appears out of nowhere. It's drawn to the superpowered beings that have so often contained it in the past, and it leeches off of their energy so that they can't harm it. Samaritan thinks, every time I hit it, I grow weaker, and that it always attacks me when I'm tired. But the Samaritan eventually manages to defeat the Living Nightmare by flying it out into space and chucking it into the sun. As the Samaritan watches the Living Nightmare fly into the sun, he notices, sure enough, it blinks out of existence as soon as it's far enough away from the emotions that power it. In some ways, that's the most frustrating part of the entire battle. Finally, after a very long day, it is just after 1 a.m. The Samaritan arrives back at his apartment, and he is exhausted. As soon as his head hits the pillow, he falls asleep. And once again, while he sleeps, he dreams, and in his dreams, he flies. Astro City Issue 2, The Scoop. A new reporter has been hired at the Astro City Rocket newspaper, and he is meeting the editor of the paper, a man named Elliot Mills. Elliot Mills is a real legend in the newspaper business in the city. After introductions are made, the new reporter looks at the various framed articles in Elliot Mills's office. A lot of the articles are very elaborate and big splashy stories, but the reporter notices one story that seems kind of unimportant. The reporter asks, "Sorry, this article you've got framed here, I can understand why you've framed all the others, but why this one?" Elliot answers, "You're very observant. I like that. That's a story I usually tell over lunch, but if you'd like to hear it now." The young reporter says, "Of course, sir." So Elliot then tells the man of the story behind this article. He sits down in his chair and he begins by saying, "Let me set the stage for you. The year was 1959, a dozen years since the city was rebuilt and renamed, 2 years past Sputnik. The Lamplighter and the All-American had just announced a retirement, but it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something was beginning, and there was nowhere in the world I'd rather have been than in Astro City. I was a lot like you, a kid right out of journalism school, new to the city. I had a new job, a girl. The world around me was fresh and vital. There was a spirit and community, a sense that we were all pulling together for the space race, for democracy. Whatever was going on in the world, we were a part of it." Well, back then in the city, Elliot, he watched a hero known as the Silver Agent stop some bank robbers. Afterwards, he phoned the Astro City Rocket and wanted the front page story on it. But a veteran reporter already had claim to the story. Elliot, he was a new reporter then, and he just so desperately wanted to make a name for himself. He wanted his first big break on an article. So much so that the veteran reporters at the newspaper kind of made fun of him for it. They said sarcastically, "Elliot Mills, hotshot reporter, ace newshound." They hand him a beer at the bar and say, "Your Pulitzer, sir." That night, though, as Elliot was walking the streets, he saw some robed men, like monks or something. He could sense that this was definitely a story of some sort. The monks then began some sort of ritual involving a great fish, and then the hero, the Silver Agent, appeared before them. The monks conducting their ceremonies said, "I open the channels to your world, and I make our separate currents one." And then, before you know it, the Silver Agent and the monks, and Elliot himself, were transported into some sort of half-world, where they stood before some being called Chirac the Devourer. Chirac, then using his powers, transformed the robed monks into shark-like humanoids. And then the Honor Guard showed up. It had only been a few weeks since Maximilians had rallied the world's greatest heroes, old and new, against the legions of midnight. At the time, they didn't know if they'd be staying together, but there they were, rallied around the Silver Agent. There was Max, Cleopatra, Leopard Man, Kit Kat, Star Woman, the Enforcer, even the bouncing Beatnik was there. Elliot Mills stayed hidden, but he watched it all. He had the scoop of the century. He watched Honor Guard and the Silver Agent battle these sharks. As the battle continued, though, Chirac the Devourer and the Shark Men were gaining the upper hand. There was just too many sharks. Honor Guard was going to lose, but then, all of a sudden, another hero showed up. Elliot mumbled to himself, "Oh, the old soldier." No one had seen him since 1944, but he'd been thought dead before in 1918 and in 1898 and in 1863. Anyway, the old soldier joined the fighting, and he yelled to the others, "The altar is the keystone that holds this place together." So with those instructions, the Silver Agent destroyed the altar, and it somehow magically vanquished Chirac and his followers. There was a popping sound and then a rush of air, like the cavern of some sort of cosmic sink had been unplugged, and the force was incredible. There was a bright light, and then all of a sudden, Elliot found himself back in the real world. He was by the train station and he almost got hit by a train. Afterwards, he rushed back to the bar near his office. When his coworkers there saw Elliot a mess, they said, "Holy cow, what happened to you?" Elliot, disheveled, replied, "I need a typewriter." And Elliot, he frantically typed all night. He had the greatest story that would make his career. He typed all night, and the next morning he gave it to his editor. And after his editor read it, he said, "I'm not publishing this." And Elliot replied, "What? What do you mean you're not running it?" The editor answered, "I can't, Elliot. It's unsupportable. I've read it, but it's completely unsourced. You have no witnesses." Elliot answers, "But I was there. I saw it. The agent, the Sharkman, the old soldier. He was close enough for me to touch. I was there." The editor continues, "No offense, Elliot, but you're a new reporter, his first week on the job, bringing in a wild story like this? Extra-dimensional attack, mystic half-worlds, the old soldier? Would you believe it if you were in my shoes?" Elliot, disappointed, said, But... His editor replied, "Rewrite it, Elliot. Rewrite it. And stick to the facts you can back up." So Elliot rewrote it, and then he rewrote it again, and again, and again, after his editor kept denying the piece, saying, "Look, Elliot, stop trying to be a detective. Be a reporter. You have some facts here, hard facts. Verify them, and that's your piece. Now don't come back until you've done it right." So Elliot, he rewrote it some more, and finally he got his piece into the evening edition. Although it wasn't as fantastical as the story he initially wanted. Back now in the current day once again, the young reporter hearing the story says, "That's it? That's how it ends? But your story, what you wrote the first time, your friends at the bar, your girlfriend, what did they say?" Elliot answered, "Oh, I was in the doghouse, and they all laughed at me for months. Remember, the Honor Guard had no headquarters back then, no press secretary. I couldn't confirm the story I had for years. And by then, both Chirac the Devourer and the old soldier had already turned up again." The new reporter says, "Wow, you had a story of Chirac the Devourer returning 5 years earlier. And you also had the return of the old soldier before the fall of Saigon. It must have been incredibly frustrating for you." Elliot answers, "Oh, it was. I carried that article with me for years, and once I became an editor, I had it framed." The young reporter asks, as a reminder that hidebound editing can stifle the news? Elliot answers, "No. That's what most people think when they hear the story, but no, I saved the article because my editor was right. Now, come on, it's time for lunch. Let's go." As they leave the office, Elliot says, "Here at the Rocket, we print what we can prove. Sometimes it's spectacular, and sometimes it isn't. But our readers count on us, and spectacular or not, they know if they read it in the Rocket, it's the truth." And finally, as they head the office, we see that framed article that Elliot got published. It didn't have any of the fantastical stuff that he couldn't prove. The article's headline just was, "Trolley Delayed by Shark." Astro City, Issue 3, A Little Knowledge. A low-level criminal named Andrew Eyes Einstein is in the Chesler district of Astro City in an area known as the Sweatshop. He just partook in a robbery that went south. All of his comrades in the robbery got arrested, but not him. He managed to get away. He doesn't even think the cops saw him. Andrew, he's a little concerned. He thinks to himself, all right, so I screwed up. I was the lookout and I should have been looking out better, but it ain't my fault. If they all hadn't missed a silent alarm or something, there wouldn't have been cops that could pass me. Anyway, as Andrew, he walks the roofs, trying to lie low, trying to make sure the cops or none of the masked heroes see him. And as Andrew was up on that roof, he notices one of Astro City's major heroes on the street, a hero named Jack in the Box. Jack in the Box is a clown-styled loner hero with a strong need for justice. Now, I know when you see his clown appearance, you think he's a bad guy like the Joker, but he's actually a good guy in Astro City. So Andrew, from the rooftop, he spots Jack in the Box, and he notices Jack in the Box removes his mask and gets dressed into his civilian outfit. Andrew ducks. Holy shit! He just saw Jack in the Box's real face. And whoever this Jack in the Box is, he turns and looks directly at Andrew. Or did he? Maybe Andrew ducked before the guy got a chance to see him. Up there in that roof, Andrew, cowering, says, he didn't see me. Did he see me? No, man, he didn't see me. After Andrew finally calms down, it finally really sinks in. That was Jack in the Box I just saw. I just saw Jack in the Box's real face. The narration then explains Jack in the Box, he's been around for like 40 years and nobody's tumbled to his secrets before. Not the Deacon, not the Brass Monkey, not the Human Weasel. Heck, the cops have been after him a time or two, but they never caught him and he always cleared his name. A lot of the criminals in town would love to know who Jack in the Box is, but nobody ever got a look at his face. Nobody but me, that is. That's the trick, ain't it? You gotta keep your eyes open. You gotta look for your opportunities. Andrew then starts imagining himself being very rich, with lots of money, and everyone in the criminal underworld celebrating him. He imagines two criminals admiring him, saying, that guy's incredible. He's a high roller overnight. It's worth a cool mill, and he says anyone could have done it, if they just kept their eyes open. Later on, Andrew goes to the bar where a lot of his criminal friends hang out at. A group of them say to him, hey Eyes, I hear Jimmy went down last night on your lookout. Andrew responds, hey, that ain't fair. Jack in the Box, he was waiting for us. He gagged me and then the cops came and I barely managed to slip away. The other criminals say, you snuck out on Jack in the Box? Andrew responds, go ahead, scoff at me, don't believe me. Ain't like I'm gonna have to put up with any of this much longer. The other criminals interested say, hey, you got something for us, Eyes? You got something with money in it? Anything in it for your buddies? Andrew, he then thinks to himself, I was planning to get these guys to help me figure out how to sell Jack in the Box's ID to the Deacon. The Deacon is a big criminal in Astro City that would be interested in Jack in the Box's identity. Andrew, he then thinks more, but that won't play. These guys would cut me out of the deal as soon as they got the chance. I can see it now. He then imagines himself lying in a ditch as his three friends are dressed in fancy suits and they have stacks of cash in their hands. And then they look at him and say, oh, look at that, a ruffian of some sort. He tried to touch my suit. I'll have the chauffeur rough him up and toss him into the river. Such impertinence. With his imagination scenario over, Andrew then tells his friends, it's nothing, guys. I just got a job offer to do some work in my aunt's house out in California. I'm gonna go on a little vacation, you know? And just as he's talking to his friends, all of a sudden, Jack in the Box jumps in through the window and he starts beating up people in the bar. Andrew, he leaves saying, he's after me. Jimmy squealed. He's trying to bring me in. Jack in the Box, though, he just seems to be there for some other information. Jack's yelling at the people in the bar,
The middleman's picking up some stolen goods Thursday night, I hear. I want to know what, and I want to know where, and I want to know now." Meanwhile, Andrew manages to slip out into the men's room and then climb out the window and get away. When Andrew's back in his apartment, he starts to get a little paranoid. He thinks to himself, "Oh man, this is bad. Worst thing you can do in this town is draw attention to yourself. Double worst is masked attention. And the guys, they know I've got something. Maybe Jack in the Box knows. I could be in real trouble. I don't even got nothing for sure yet. Gotta check things out." Andrew then spends the next several days walking through town where he thinks the real Jack in the Box lives. So he wants to see if he can spot him in his civilian outfit again. And sure enough, after a few days, he spots Jack in the Box in his civilian clothes. Whoever Jack in the Box is, he's walking with this woman here. Andrew, he kind of recognizes her. She's on the morning Channel 3 news. Andrew, he's thinking what he should do. He could just wait till they leave and then maybe get their name off the buzzer, but a lot of people don't label their buzzers so instead Andrew just runs over to them and asks the woman, "Excuse me, can I have your autograph?" The woman, who works on the news, being polite, says, "Sure, who should I sign it to?" Andrew, thinking quickly, says, my name's Jack Bashsinger." So the woman signs her name. Afterwards, Andrew looks at the signature. So the woman's name was Tamara Dixon, and he looks her up on the computer and finds out that she is married to a man named Zachary Johnson. Zachary Johnson, owner and CEO of the small but growing ZJ Toys. Andrew's got him. Now he has the name of Jack in the Box, Zachary Johnson. Andrew, though his paranoia is growing, he thinks back to his interaction with Tamara and Zachary. He told her that his name was Jack Bashsinger? So stupid. Why didn't he just say his name was Jack in a Box and slit his own throat right in front of him? Andrew then starts imagining Jack in the Box torturing him with various clown-based imagery. Andrew then tries to dismiss these thoughts, saying, it probably didn't mean anything to him. He probably wasn't even paying attention. Later on, Andrew was doing a job at a pier, carrying some stolen crates to a truck, when all of a sudden, Jack in the Box bursts from one of the crates and attacks him and the other criminals. Andrew, he managed to run away as Jack in the Box was fighting some of the others. Afterwards, Andrew, he's really continuing to worry that Jack in the Box knows who he is. But even though it's high risk, he's got to sell this information because it's worth something. So he thinks, maybe I'll get to the deacon myself and sell him the secret. But then he imagines how that will go. He'll tell the deacon that he knows Jack in the Box's secret identity, and then the deacon and his men will torture that information out of him. And then, once he tells them that identity, they'll just kill him and dispose of him so he doesn't give the information to anyone else. So maybe that's not going to work either. Andrew's so frustrated. He thinks, I don't know. What do I do? I was going to make $1 million. I was going to be rich, but who can I sell this to? Could I go to the news, expose the secret? Would that get Jack off my back? Maybe the papers. Newspapermen, they don't reveal their sources. Except the deacon would want to know, and I bet they'd reveal him when you start cutting off body parts. Damn it. Andrew, frustrated, he then remembers the first time he saw Jack in the Box. It was years ago when he was just a kid, and it was such a thrill. He saw Jack in the Box jumping up high in the sky, and as a little kid, he said to his mom, "Wow, this is the best place ever. I don't want to live anywhere else." Back in the current day on the street, Andrew gets startled again. Was it Jack in the Box? Oh no, it was just another hero, the Quarrel. Andrew, he then thinks, oh man, this is gonna kill me. It wasn't even him and it almost killed me. I can't go back to my room. He might be waiting for me. Or maybe he doesn't even know. Maybe he looked at me funny on the street because he'd seen me on Craig Avenue but couldn't place me. Or maybe he was just after the middleman tonight. And maybe I'm safe. Maybe I'm safe from him, safe from the deacon, safe from the guys at the bar, from the papers. Maybe. Later on, Andrew, in the end, he just decides to get on a bus out of town. He says, I risk going back to my room. There wasn't anybody there, but I jumped at every shadow. So I got some clothes, my toothbrush, my emergency stash. It's a big country, and this is just one town. There's opportunity anywhere for a man who keeps his eyes open, for a sharp-eyed man who... Nah, on the other hand, maybe not. Andrew, he decides to go up to Anchorage, Alaska. Not exactly a happening town, but it's quiet, at least. Astro City, Issue 4, Safeguards. We learn of a district in Astro City known as Shadow Hill, right below Mount Kirby, which I assume is some sort of homage to Jack Kirby. Shadow Hill is one of the oldest parts of the city. It was founded by Eastern European immigrants who came to the city to build it. It is notable for being a major source of supernatural energy, to the extent that many of the residents have to learn rudimentary rituals in order to keep the ghosts and vampires at bay. Despite the Eastern European Gothic horror overtones, many of the residents call this neighborhood home, and they like it. We meet one woman, Marta, and she lives in Shadow Hill. And although she likes it and her family is here, she's maybe considering moving somewhere else. When Marta wakes up, she talks with her mother, and then she checks the wolfsbane in the window and makes sure it's still fresh. And then she taps her crucifix to reassure herself that it's there. She then kisses her mother goodbye as she heads out for the day. Before she heads out past her front door, she says the words that she has to say. And she opens the door, which is a good oak door with ash in the frame and the sign of the deity Twos, whose sigil is used as a protective ward. As Marta walks down the cobblestone streets, the lesser night creatures still crouch, shrinking in the shadows, muttering and snarling softly. She pays them no mind, though, as they'll have retreated fully before the sun. As Marta continues walking down the street, she sees the hero, the Hanged Man, flying in the sky, making the last of his nightly rounds. She nods to him, as always, offering thanks for his protective vigil. The Hanged Man is the mysterious, eerie protector of Shadow Hill. He has been protecting the community here for over a century. Little is known of his origin, but he seems to be able to wield enormous power. Marta then buys her breakfast, and then she finally catches the bus that's going to take her to work. The bus driver greets her. Marta can see the relief on the bus driver's face as they finally leave Shadow Hill. The bus then finally approaches City Center, a world that looks to the future, straining for the sky with a reach of chrome and steel. A world where Marta is no longer a child but a woman of her own, defined by her skill and work and choices. As much as she loves her home in Shadow Hill, as much as she loves her family, she also loves the city and downtown. On the way to work, Marta sees the hero Winged Victory flying in the sky. The news said that she broke up an armored carjacking last night. When Marta sees Winged Victory, the sight of her, proud and noble, never fails to set her heart racing. The way that Winged Victory sets her own course, free of gravity, free of rules. The way she does what she thinks is right without a care for tradition or the approval of others. She makes Marta feel like she can do anything. Marta finally arrives at her job at a big law firm. She works in accounting. Once she walks into the office, she sees her boss, Darcy Conroy, one of the firm's brightest stars, giving an interview. Darcy is currently the fiancé of Nick First of the First family. Marta envies her poise in the public spotlight, the way she walks through the world like it belongs to her. Once Marta talks with her various coworkers, some of them give her a hard time about where she lives. One girl says, "I'll tell you for nothing, I couldn't do what you do, Marta. Living up there on Shadow Hill? Don't you guys have vampires up there?" Marta answers, "Some, but they're not as bad as you think. I grew up there, I guess I'm just used to it." The coworker responds, "Not as bad as you think. Listen to her." Marta, she smiles and goes about her work, but her coworker's comments stay with her. Even here, she's still just the girl from the hill. Marta wonders, what would her coworkers think if she actually told them her morning routine? They might think her routine is very superstitious, but to Marta, it's just normal. One of Marta's other coworkers says that one of her roommates moved out and she has an opening in her apartment, and she's wondering if Marta is maybe interested. Marta, she contemplated it. Could she really leave Shadow Hill and live somewhere else in the city? When Marta told her parents that night about the offer to live somewhere else, her mother did not take the news well. She said, "No, definitely not." The mother then turns to her husband and says, "This is what comes. I told you, Niku. We speak English in this house, so she grows up not being an outsider, and now what happens? She becomes one of them. She works down there, and now she lives down there. Next thing you know, she's gonna marry someone down there, and we'll never see her again." Marta's dad says, "Georgie Vassalou needs help at his shop." They're trying to push Marta into maybe working at this shop that's in Shadow Hill. They even say that the shop owner's single and not bad looking. Maybe she could start a relationship with him too. Marta, she can't blame her parents. Shadow Hill is their world, and downtown is alien to them as thoughts of Wolfsbane are to people in her office. It's not that Marta doesn't like it here in Shadow Hill. This is her home. The crooked, winding streets, the smell of garlic and of bread baking. The next morning, Marta does her morning routine all over again as she prepares to go to work. As she walks down the street, she nods once again to the hanged man. Except this time, the hanged man looked at her. He never actually looks at her. Maybe that's a warning or something. When Marta arrives at work, she talks to the coworker about the apartment again. They make plans for Marta to come see it the next day, and maybe decide if she wants to live there or not. Moments later, there are some supervillains outside the building. The supervillains are a group known as the Unholy Alliance. The villains yell from the street, "Attention, Binderbeck Plaza! You've been scheduled for demolition. And when the dust settles, if any of you are still standing, don't say you weren't warned." Darcy Conroy, whose fiancé is a member of the First Family, uses a special pin she has to summon help from her boyfriend. The Unholy Alliance started attacking the building and destroying it. Eventually, the First Family arrived and they started fighting the Unholy Alliance. One of the villains, Slamburger, grabbed Marta and almost killed her, but Marta was saved by Nick First of the First Family when he subdued him. In the aftermath, the First Family's swift arrival contained the damage so that Marta's offices would only have to be repaired and not completely rebuilt, and the Unholy Alliance was captured. Marta, she sustained minor injuries but was, for the most part, okay. Something changed for Marta that day though. City Center where she works, it's just a place. A different kind of place from Shadow Hill, but not that different. There are heroes and monsters in both places, and down here, there are rules down here, too. Marta thinks of her boss, Darcy Conroy, and how Darcy had her own kind of talisman that she had for protection. The First Family pin that she used to summon her boyfriend. But Darcy's not magic, she just knows the rules. She had her talisman and it works for her. But it's her talisman, that's the real difference. As Marta returns home that night to Shadow Hill, she thinks, "I'm safe here. There are unthinkable dangers swirling in the shadows outside my window, but they're my protection. They're my shield against the dangers I don't understand." I sit and think about charms and talismans. Miss Conroy has a talisman. The city has a talisman. What do I have? I was so scared. I wanted to be anywhere but here. I wanted to get out, to go, to be somewhere else, and I sit and I watch the shapes in the mists, and I wonder, was it really the hill that scared me? I sit up all night, and in the morning I call the office. They've rented temporary space, but I can take a few days off, they say. I don't need to. I check the window latches, I unseal the door, I tap my crucifix. In the morning I buy my coffee at Groza's, and I nod to the hanged man. I breathe in the soft morning air and I eat my breakfast in the warm light of the sun. Perhaps I can find an apartment to rent nearby. I'll have to ask around. So I think the point of this particular story was that Marta grew up in this kind of weird part of town where they're very superstitious. And although outsiders think their superstitions are weird, Marta is kind of used to them. She thought about moving to another part of the city, a maybe more socially acceptable part of the city. But in the end, she kind of accepts that there's some comfort of home. She understands it, and she kind of likes it. So in the end, she's kind of content to stay in Shadow Hill. Astro City, Issue 5, Reconnaissance. An old man named Bridwell is watching a superhero villain fight go down. One group is known as the Astro City Irregulars. They're a ragtag group of young cast-offs, unwanted by the rest of the superhero community. They were battling these villains, and this other hero, Crackerjack, joined in on the action. Eventually, a police officer came over and told this Bridwell, who was watching, "Hey, what are you doing here? How'd you get past the police blockade? Go home. This is a battle zone." So Bridwell walked for about an hour and a half without seeing much of anything else. He bought some newspapers, he read. Eventually, Samaritan flew overhead real fast. Eventually, it was time for him to update his files. Bridwell pulls out a fancy-looking computer, and he starts typing away on it, keeping a directory of various powered beings on Earth. But Bridwell eventually gets annoyed when a little kid comes over to him and asks to see his device. Bridwell gruffs at the kid, "Don't touch it!" Bridwell eventually walks home to his apartment complex. There he is greeted by a young man named Eugene Wallace. Eugene lives in the building. He's trying to be an actor, but he's not getting many parts. He seems like a nice enough man, though. Bridwell goes up to his room. The older woman in the apartment complex, they comment on the young Eugene saying, "Another rejection for an acting job? You'd think the boy would learn. Why can't he get a normal, respectable job like any other?" Well, you know what I heard. You know those theater types are a bunch of sissy boys. Bridwell makes his way upstairs to his apartment room as he overhears these women talking. They really annoy him. He thinks to himself, "I can't fathom how Eugene deals with these women. Their twittering ignorance, their incessant, meaningless noise, reminding themselves they still draw breath and belittling or insulting every fact or occurrence that catches their eye. Why, on my planet, women are warriors, bold and strong, whose actions and words have weight and force." As Bridwell enters his apartment, he shapeshifts into his true form, his alien form. He then begins transmitting a message back to his home planet. Bridwell, thinking of the annoying woman downstairs, thinks, it would almost be worth it to send the signal to my planet, to set the wheels of invasion in motion, simply to see those women dragged screaming into the work pits, to toil themselves into the grave, their twittering silenced forever. But he feels he's not ready to do that. He reports back, "Reconnaissance continues. Extensive paranormal activity requires more time to catalog. No determination reached." Bridwell then thinks to himself, "My transmission is a lie. I have long since cataloged this planet in enough detail. I could have sent the signal, and yet there is something about this world, something that makes me delay. I do not understand it, but I cannot deny it." Afterwards, Bridwell retires to bed. He falls asleep, and when he wakes up, the entire apartment building is on fire. Bridwell was stuck in his apartment complex. How was he going to get out? Well, he could easily shapeshift and reach the ground that way, but then everyone would see his disguise. Luckily, before Bridwell had to make that decision, the hero known as Crackerjack burst into the apartment complex room and saved him. Once Crackerjack was back down on the street, he told the crowd of people, "No autographs, please ladies, I've still got work to do, so if you'll excuse me." As Crackerjack says this, the apartment complex explodes from a backdraft, and Crackerjack, surprised, screams out, "Oh no, my record collection!" Crackerjack accidentally revealed he lived in that building, and his record collection just went up in flames. Some of the civilians on the street overheard this, especially the old women that lived in the building. Now all of a sudden, they kind of figured out that the young Eugene Wallace was actually the hero known as Crackerjack. Eugene, embarrassed, just said, "Gotta go," and then he took off. The old women in the building commented, "Oh, It can't be. That Eugene boy? He was always so quiet. Bridwell becomes annoyed again. He thinks, ugh, these women, they twitter among themselves, reasserting order in their meaningless little lives with empty words. And suddenly I want resolution. I want to end this, to get away from their chatter forever. So Eugene Wallace is Crackerjack. I never suspected. He claims that all others pale beside him. Very well, I shall take him at his word. While he rescued me, I attached a send circuit to his belt. It will let me see and hear whatever happens to him. I shall observe him until dawn, and then I shall make my final judgment. No more dithering, no more indecision. Eugene Wallace shall be humanity in a microcosm tonight. If he proves worthy, I shall spare his planet. If not, we enslave this world and all on it. But either way, it shall all depend on him. So the very boisterous and arrogant Crackerjack makes some superhero rounds for the night. He fights a villain named the Steel Devil. The Steel Devil accidentally crushed himself by shooting down debris with his pitchfork that destroyed him. Afterwards, Crackerjack said, "Ha! Another daring triumph for Crackerjack, the acme of adventures. And not bad work if I do say so myself." Bridwell, watching this remotely, says, "Not bad work? He is saved by chance, and he considers it a victory, and he congratulates himself?" Crackerjack then sees the hero, Jack-in-the-Box, jump by in the night. Crackerjack quips, "Hey, Jack-in-the-Box, how's it hanging, Pagliacci?" Jack-in-the-Box ignores Crackerjack. Crackerjack, annoyed, says, "Huh, be like that. See if I don't get my lawyer on you for unauthorized use of the Jack name." This also annoys Bridwell, watching this from afar. He comments to himself, Jack-in-the-Box debuted in 1964, or 1989 if one assumes that the current one is a different man. He predates Crackerjack by either 2 years or 27. If anyone has claim to the name, it's him. Later on, Crackerjack joined two other heroes, Nightingale and Sunbird, on their stakeout. Those two heroes were working on this case for months, and it is now finally time to arrest the criminals. Crackerjack offers to help the lady heroes out, and they say that Jack is welcome to help them, but remember that this case is theirs, not his. Jack, he says, "I'm only lending a helping hand, dear lady. Pretend I'm not even here." Of course, once the criminals are apprehended and the press arrives, Jack takes full credit. He says to the reporters, "Yes, it was a long and complex investigation, getting the goods on this vicious criminal ring, but I want you to know there's no way I could have done it without the assistance of the girls here." Bridwell, commenting on Crackerjack, says, "He depends on luck. He's jealous of others. He does sloppy work. He steals credit for the achievements of others. And he calls it a successful night? He lies even to himself. He's no paragon. He's no admirable man. And yet, when our race was young, we were dismissed as the vermin of the galaxy, and not without reason. We were weak and stupid, and we lost every war we entered into. But we never gave up. We never stopped striving, and now, millennia later, we are powerful and respected and feared. Perhaps it is that indomitability in these humans that strikes a chord with me. Perhaps I shall report back to my people that it would be too much trouble to pacify them, that they would resist beyond profitability. Perhaps this world shall be left alone." As Bridwell thinks this to himself, all of a sudden some news reporters come down to their burned down apartment complex, and they start interviewing some of the old women in the building. The reporter questions the old woman if Eugene Wallace was indeed Crackerjack. The old women, who were actually putting down Eugene earlier, now that they know he is Crackerjack, are all of a sudden saying positive things. They tell the news reporter, "Well, naturally we knew Eugene was somebody. We've got eyes, don't we? We had our suspicions all along. He was such a nice young man. Everyone liked him." Not as if it would have escaped our notice, not something that out of the ordinary, not under our own roof. Once again, these old women really piss Bridwell off. Bridwell, he storms off. He pulls out his fancy alien computer, and he sends a transmission to his home planet. Signal is a go. Transmission is complete. Begin the invasion. Astro City, Issue 6. Dinner at 8. The other heroes have managed to convince the Samaritan to take the night off, and they've also arranged for him to go on a date with Winged Victory. So for comparison purposes, it would be like the Justice League setting up Superman to go on a date with Wonder Woman. Samaritan is hesitant to take the night off, but he eventually decides to go through with it. He flies over to Winged Victory's house and gives her a bouquet of flowers. She was in her civilian identity, but she changes into her Winged Victory form, and then the two of them prepare to go out for the night. When Samaritan looks at Winged Victory, he thinks, she's beautiful. She's beautiful and intelligent and brave and forthright, and I can't stop myself from thinking there's no point to this. I'm too busy. Samaritan and Winged Victory are at first a little awkward, kind of not sure what to say. Winged Victory eventually comments, "This is priceless, isn't it? The world's most prominent superhero and superheroine, and neither of us has been out on a date in so long. We've forgotten how it works. Come on, let's get out of here. I'm glad Beauty talked me into this, but the clock's ticking." The two of them go flying in the night sky. Winged Victory asks, "So, where to?" Samaritan answers, "I don't know, I didn't think to make any reservations anywhere." Winged Victory suggests that they just show up at a restaurant anyway and make a fuss. So the two of them show up at a pretty fancy restaurant, and immediately the restaurant's staff are accommodating. Winged Victory and Samaritan want to dine at their restaurant? Sure. They seat the both of them by the dance floor and bring out privacy screens, but every eye in the place is on them as they put them up. Winged Victory orders some wine for her, and Samaritan just says, "Club soda, thanks." Winged Victory laughs, "On your night off, you do take this seriously, don't you?" Samaritan answers, "Well, yes, I do. I know the others are watching out for crises, but still, if they need me. Anyway, let's not think about it. Let's just enjoy the evening." As they sit at the restaurant, the waitstaff start coming over and saying, "Ordinarily we wouldn't disturb our guests, but the mayor is here and he asked if you'd sign a menu for him." Samaritan, he says, "The mayor? Oh, sure, no problem." And then all of a sudden, a judge asked to get another signature, and then a senator, and before you know it, Samaritan and Winged Victory finish their drinks and decide to leave. They're then flying in the sky, and they're wondering where they should go next. Maybe they should fly to Paris or Tokyo. Samaritan says, though, he has an idea. Meanwhile, while their date is going on, Quarrel, Crackerjack, and the Enforcer handle an avalanche in Montana. Samaritan and Winged Victory change into their civilian clothes, and they decide to eat at a very simple restaurant called Beefy Bob's. It's just a diner. So the two of them have some hamburger and fries. Samaritan then introduces himself under his civilian name, Asa Martin, to Winged Victory. And then he starts talking about his day job as a journalist. Then he gives a little background on his superhero past. He says, "I was actually born in the 35th century at a time when Earth was dying. Environmental disasters, radiation. A risky plan was put into motion to send someone back in time to stop the event that triggered all this. I passed the test and was chosen to go. I never knew that much about the mechanics of it. My training was largely historical. They did teach me enough to repair my xiometer should it malfunction, but that was about it. After 2 years of preparations, they had the process ready. I said goodbye to my family, and then I was hurled backwards through time. When I traveled back in time, I didn't just pass through the time stream, I was swept up in it, buffeted by it, suffused with Empyrean fire, the primal energy of both time and space. I finally arrived in late 1985, transformed. I was seething with energy, bursting with strength, and my hair was a bright blue, and I was hopelessly overwhelmed. On January 28, 1986, the event I'd been sent to avert happened. A sealing ring malfunctioned during the launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger. As a result, a solid rocket booster broke free, causing the external fuel tank to explode, and the ship broke up and crashed into the ocean, and everyone aboard was killed. Or they would have been. I threw my Empyrean web around the shuttle at the last moment, protecting the crew compartment from the blast and preventing the craft from breaking apart. It was the only solution I could think of given the seconds I had to act. Samaritan then explains how that was when he was revealed to society. And when reporters asked his name, he just kind of made it up and said, "Just call me a good Samaritan." Samaritan then goes on further to say, "I used my power to leach the blue out of my hair and got a job where I could interact with society, where I could build myself a life." Winged Victory, very interested, then asks, "So what happened after?" Samaritan answers, "Well, that was it. That was the end of my mission. I don't know what it changed. Maybe one of the Challenger 7 became a world leader or had an influential child, but that was the crucial event that saved the world." Winged Victory then asks, "So you stayed Samaritan even though your job was done?" Samaritan answers, "Well, that's what I was trained for, more or less. You know, I did manage to get back to the 35th century once after a battle with Enter Neon, and it was green and lush and healthy, and my mission had clearly been a success, but I couldn't find my family. They didn't exist anymore. They were never born with the changes I made to the time stream. The dwelling unit where I grew up was gone too, and in its place was an automated taco stand. How my time trip lets me exist without any parents, I don't know. But the world I came from is gone. It simply never was." Winged Victory says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, your family and your whole world." Samaritan brushes it off, saying, "It's okay. We knew going into it that this would probably happen if I was successful, and we all agreed that it was worth doing." Winged Victory then talks a little bit about herself. She often focuses on saving women, especially from abusive men. She also runs a series of shelters and teaches some self-defense classes. The two of them then share how they're both so preoccupied with their heroic work that they don't have time for much of a personal life. Winged Victory shares, "You know, I don't think I've been back to my hometown or seen my mom in 2 years." Samaritan to this says, "Wow, you're almost as cut off as I am." This kind of offends Winged Victory. She says, "Oh, come on. I don't have the luxury you do. Keeping a secret identity you don't even use. I mean, where is this normal life you say you want? You're always on the go. You barely even have time for tonight. Why not just pack it in?" Samaritan answers, "Well, there's always hope. Everything we do is unrealistic. We're fighting for dreams and we can't give up. Not even when, maybe especially when, it's impossible. Look, maybe you're fine. Maybe you're still the woman you were, just more powerful and effective, but it seems to me that, well, if you don't have to deal with the world through anything but the costume and the mission, then hasn't Winged Victory become a kind of shelter herself?" This actually kind of angers Winged Victory. She then changes back into her superhero outfit, and then she yells at Samaritan, saying, "Just because you destroyed your whole world and have been trying to make up for it ever since, doesn't mean I have to go crawling back to that broken, pathetic, scared little thing I once was. I like what I am now. I like it." She then leaves the diner and flies into the sky. And Samaritan, he flies after her. Eventually, he catches up to her. Winged Victory says, "You're really annoying, you know that?" Samaritan apologizes, saying, I didn't mean to be." Winged Victory continues, "It's like you're a god pretending to be normal, and I'm a normal woman trying to live up to the role of a god. Letting go of that even for just a little while, well, it's hard to believe I'll ever capture it again." Samaritan solemnly says, "I guess I never looked at it that way." Winged Victory replies, "Don't worry about it. You've given me a lot to think about, just as long as it hasn't been entirely one-sided." Samaritan says, No, you said some things I haven't considered, but maybe I should." As the two of them are flying up above the city, Samaritan, he says, "Listen, nothing. No gunshots, no screams, no explosions, no avalanches, no screeching tires, no death rays, no alien attackers, just a moment of peace and quiet." Among the silence and the quiet, the two of them eventually share a kiss. But then, a silent alarm goes off in Palo Alto, and Samaritan says he's gotta check it out. And Winged Victory replies, yeah, and I should deal with this thing happening near Sekowowski Street. As the two of them part ways that night, Samaritan, just before Winged Victory's out of range, he hears her laugh quietly to herself and whisper, there's always hope. There's always hope. Samaritan thinks, well, there is. And with this, we end Astro City, Volume 1.
All right, so that was Astro City Volume 1. I really loved this book and think it is worthy of a lot of the awards it got. And also, this was written in the mid-90s. Mid-90s comics weren't typically this good. This is really good for mid-90s especially. So yeah, let me go through the various issues in this first volume here and tell you what I liked and what I maybe didn't like so much. But most of it I liked. So the first issue, In Dreams, where we are following the Samaritan, or the Superman of this world, I really loved that perspective of learning what a typical day in the life of this hero is. I've read a lot of Superman comics, and I can't think of a specific issue where they told the story this way, where we see Superman's life from the moment he hits that alarm clock when he wakes up to when he goes to bed again at night. And I really liked seeing what his life was like, but also we are meant to sympathize with the Samaritan a bit too, seeing he doesn't have much time for personal life, even though he can travel so fast and do all this stuff. He doesn't have as much time to just be. And he even gets a little sad about it because he wants love. He wants to date. He wants that romantic connection, but he doesn't have the time for it. And it saddens him a bit. But he's so busy, he can't really reflect on it enough. And I liked seeing him constantly balance flying back to work and making appearances and then flying out and hanging out with the honor guard, the Justice League of this world, and then dealing with something on the other side of the world, and then also doing stuff like showing up to get awards. Which, of course, if you were a hero, you would get tons of these useless awards, and you'd have to just show up for the public appearance sake of it all. So I love that little plot point in there too. And then at the end, he goes back to bed and he dreams again. And honestly, just a very poetic issue, amazing. And that issue also won an award for single issue for a Harvey Award, and it totally deserved it. Amazing issue. All right, issue 2, The Scoop, about the journalist. I thought was also great. We're learning the perspective of this journalist and his rise throughout the years, and seeing his first kind of story. And he saw this crazy stuff happen in the 50s and 60s with this crazy superhero battle, but his editor didn't believe him. And also, he didn't have the proof anyway. And it was all about the facts and being able to verify what you are reporting. And I love that angle of it. And yeah, so great story there too. Issue 3 is actually my favorite in this volume, where we have this low-level criminal that discovers this Jack-in-the-Box guy's identity. And I just love it, because I think of all the low-level criminals that potentially could discover Batman's identity. But yet, the paranoia we see from that low-level criminal and his desire to, like, I gotta sell this information. It's so valuable, but everyone's gonna turn on me. The supervillains I can sell it to are probably going to try to kill me to keep it quiet if I give it to them so that they can hoard the information for themselves. And then also, he's scared that Jack-in-the-Box is going to come and get him. And I loved all that. And I loved how it ended too, where he's just like, you know what? I'm going to leave this town. I'm moving to freaking Alaska here at the end. So yeah, amazing story. I loved it. I love the perspective of following that low-level criminal character. So great stuff. Then there is the Safeguards issue, which I also liked, although I don't know if I would have gave the Eisner for Best Single Issue to that one for me, but still, pretty good. So we're following this woman, and we're seeing all the rituals she does in this Shadow Hill neighborhood. And also, I had a lot of fun just kind of learning about Shadow Hill and what life is like there, and all the superstitions people do, so I thought that was cool. But I thought it was interesting, this woman's perspective and how Initially, she's maybe a little bit embarrassed about living in Shadow Hill and how weird it is, but in the end, she takes comfort in the familiarity of it, and she is now content to stay there. So it was a neat little story. Issue 5, also great, about this guy contemplating if he should call his alien homeworld and kick off the invasion of Earth. And he kind of likes Earth a bit, and has learned to sort of sympathize with Earth and what they're like. But some of those old women really pissed him off. And he's like, you know what? Screw this planet. Let's kick off that invasion. And now we don't see the alien invasion. Maybe that'll come in the future volumes. But I thought it was a really fun little tale. And then also that other hero that was kind of a jackass was also fun to learn a little bit of him too. And the final issue in this one, where the Samaritan goes on the date with the Wonder Woman sort of character of this world, was also pretty good too. I love some romance in a book, and seeing the awkwardness of their date, but also seeing them bond over their superhero experience was really neat as well. So yeah, all in all, great stuff. Every issue was fantastic, and even though it was self-contained, I really got so much out of it. So yeah, this is a really great opening volume, and I totally get why it got so many awards. So I'm going to give this opening volume a 9.5 out of 10. Really great stuff. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll be back in the future with volume 2.